Exercise 2.5. Again, I'm going to do some of the even numbered problems since the odd numbered ones are assigned for homework, or at least some of the odd numbered ones are assigned for homework. I'm not going to do all of them this time. I'm just going to pick some of the ones that are tricky or have key points that you need to know. So number 2 has this notion of a necessary condition. Now, the easiest way to think about this is that whenever you have a conditional, something that's a sufficient condition for something else means it should go in the antecedent. Something that's a necessary condition for something else should go in the consequent. All right. So here, Becky driving a Ferrari, and that's, he gives us letters that we can use here over here. That's the F, is a necessary condition for her being super cool. That's C. All right. So since we're told that Becky driving the Ferrari is the necessary condition, we put that here. All right, and then the sufficient condition, or the other thing, the thing it's a necessary condition for, goes here like this. All right. So when something is explicitly stated as a necessary condition, that means it's the consequent of the conditional, and the other thing is the antecedent. All right. If something is specified as a sufficient condition, then it goes as the antecedent. All right. He talks a bit in the book about the difference between these two. Sufficient condition means it's enough to bring about the effect. Right? So the example I always use, throwing a brick at a window is sufficient to break the window. Right? Another way of saying that is, if I throw the brick at the window, then the window will break. All right. So if B, the brick is sufficient to bring about W, the window breaking. All right. But notice that throwing a brick at a window is not necessary to break a window, right? Because there's lots of other ways to break a window. Means if it's not present, the effect won't come about, right? So an example I use for this, oxygen is a necessary condition for fire, right? As we all learned back in our early science class, right? Right, so that means if there's fire present, you can absolutely know there must be oxygen present, right? So notice oxygen is the necessary condition here, comes here. Now another way you could say that is if there's no oxygen, then there can't be any fire. These two sentences are equivalent. But because this one involves negations, all right, it's easier to stick with this just by putting the necessary condition into the consequent of the conditional. Now, again, notice oxygen is necessary for fire, but it's not sufficient, thankfully, because I'm sitting right now in a room that has lots of oxygen in it since I'm breathing, but yet there is no fire. So it's necessary for fire, but it's not by itself sufficient. All right? So there's a difference between those two things. The easiest way to remember it with respect to translation, if something's a sufficient condition for something else, it's the antecedent, and the other thing is a consequent. Something is a necessary condition for something else, it's the consequent, and the other thing is the antecedent. Okay, Bob won't win the election unless he outspends his opponents on advertising and goes door to door more than her. So he won't win the election unless he does this stuff, right? So you remember I said unless is best translated as just the disjunction. Left disjunct, Bob won't win the election, not B. Remember, the won't has to be the negation. It can't be part of the symbolization key. So Bob won't win the election unless this stuff. What's this stuff? He outspends his opponent and goes door to door more than her. So it's conjunction. O and D. All right. So dinosaurs were not stupid reptiles, nor were they cold-blooded. So again, this is kind of like a neither nor sentence. Not L or C. Not either or. Neither nor. Or again, an equivalent sentence is not L and not C. Dinosaurs aren't stupid and dinosaurs weren't cold-blooded. These are equivalent. All right, necessary and sufficient condition. That's where we get into the biconditional. Right, now in the symbol in the book for a biconditional is the equals sign with an extra line. Let me know if it'll let me do this. You can underline the equal sign. Yeah, so it's like 3 lines, but again, for the keyboard, just use the now it's underlining everything. Just use the less than arrow followed by the greater than arrow. Right. So biconditional means if and only if, which is just another way of saying that something is a necessary and sufficient. So if, plain old if, means sufficient condition, only if means necessary condition. So if and only if means sufficient and necessary both. So it's the biconditional. So Iran's diplomatic engagement with the U.S. is necessary and sufficient for the U.S.'s diplomatic engagement with Iran. So that's a simple biconditional. All right. So if something is both necessary and sufficient condition, use the biconditional. Again, also if and only if, that too is a biconditional. Tom will go if and only if Jerry does not go. So remember, the not has to be symbolized by the negation. It can't be part of the symbolization key of the sentence. So T, biconditional, not J. Number 14. Notice this was added. This was written well before coronavirus, but seems to apply. And I think this one had a missing letter. I think that's why I wrote it needs to add O. So let's take a look. Flu virus can be deadly, but a person can die from it only if his immune system is compromised or he is old. So the flu virus can be deadly is a sentence, but it's a conjunction, the rest of this stuff. So let's do F for flu virus can be deadly, and that's our but. Now the rest of this is the right conjunct. A person can die from it only if his immune system is compromised or he is old. So it's only if, remember, just drop in the horseshoe for only if. So what goes before only if? A person can die from it. So that's the D. Whoops. I'm going to use a bracket here since we're going to need. Only if is the conditional of the horseshoe. His immune system is compromised, so that's I, or he is old, so that's what we need the O. All right, now technically square brackets aren't allowed, only parentheses, but square brackets are, generally you can use them to make a sentence more readable. All right, so F and D conditional I or O. All right. Let's see. Both of the following are false. All right, number 20. All right, so both of the following are false. So, let's see. We're gonna have not both not. So this is a both not sentence, right? So let's just ignore the both of the following are false and translate the if it isn't raining then it isn't cold, and if it's cold then it's snowing, right? So these are both conditionals. So if it isn't raining then it isn't cold. If not R, then not C. Remember the nots have to be negations. And if it's cold then it is snowing. So if it's cold then it is snowing. All right. So what I've just translated is this sentence, right? If it isn't raining, then it's cold, and if it's cold, then it is snowing. Right? But this is saying both are false. So what we need to do for that is put a negation in front of both of those. Right? It's false that this, and it's false that this. Right? So that one's a little tricky because both of them are false, right? It's not saying, not both. It's saying both not. Both are false. Okay, let's do one or two more here. Neither Pomeranians nor Chihuahuas are good hunters, but if you train Corgis, then they become good hunters, unless you start training them when they are too old. So neither Pomeranians nor Chihuahuas are good hunters, but if you do this. So the but here is the main operator. It's, again, the conjunction. The first conjunct is the neither nor sentence. So remember, neither nor, not either or. All right, so neither Pomeranians nor Chihuahuas are good hunters, not Pomeranians or Chihuahuas, neither nor. But now we have if you train Corgis, so if C, sorry, we already used C for Chihuahuas. All right, so he has training for train, we have T. So if T, then now we have they become good hunters unless you start training them when they're too old. So that's a unless sentence, which means it's going to look like this, right? Unless, remember, the easiest way to translate is just use the disjunction. So they become good hunters is going to be H or O. Okay, so it's really important to try to, again, identify first the main operator, then break it down into parts. Focus on the parts. And if you do it, break it down into parts, it gets a lot easier. I mean, that's a complicated sentence. It has 5 atomic sentences in it. And if you just try to look at it as a whole, it just looks crazy. But if you identify the main operator and then focus on the parts, it gets a lot easier. All right. Let's see. Here's an if and only if. So again, that's a biconditional. Here's a sufficient condition. So this one will do. Okay, Tom liking Juanita is a sufficient condition for Alexa to be jealous. So Tom liking Anita is sufficient for Alexa to be jealous. So remember, sufficient condition comes first. It's the antecedent. But, all right, so now we have, that's our first conjunct. So but, right, that's a conjunction and. It is not a necessary condition. So what is not a necessary condition? Tom liking Juanita, right, is not a necessary condition. So we want to say not T is going to go in the consequent, and A will go as the antecedent. Or sorry. Not, the negation should go outside the whole conditional, right? So it's, if you said it is, meaning Tom liking Juanita is a necessary condition for Alexa to be jealous, you'd put Tom liking Anita here as the necessary condition for Alexa to be jealous. But then it says that is not the case. So the not has to go outside of the whole parentheses. All right? Okay, that's about it. I'm out of time. I think most of the rest of these are. There was one I saw where the word implies, right? So if I say something like Joe standing up implies he wants to leave, right? That means basically if Joe stands up, then he wants to leave. Right? So if something implies something else, right, that's a sort of if the first thing happens, then the second thing is going to happen. So it's really a disguised if-then sentence. So if A implies B, that means if A, then B. If Joe standing up implies he wants to leave,